Aaron, did all pitchers and catchers report today as expected?
Yes, as far as I know. I haven't gotten any of the obviously final reports, but it doesn't sound like we're missing anyone. And frankly, I think probably had 80-90% of our guys that have been here for a while already anyway. So obviously a big day getting here and getting guys through physicals and stuff. So, so far looks good.
Any surprises as far as health is concerned, or is everybody healthy coming in as far as you know?
Yeah, as far as I know, I think we're in a good spot.
You talked at the end of last year and throughout this offseason how much you like the group of guys that you have. What is your biggest concern heading into this spring training when you look at the 2026 team so far?
Look, you're starting anew, right? So there's nothing you're taking with you ultimately from last year. It's all a blank slate, and you got so many things to build here. Obviously, getting guys healthy that are going to, join the mix at some point during the year. Making sure we're building our pitchers as well and as smartly as we possibly can. And then sorting out the different levels of competition and making sure you're getting guys built up and getting the reps that they need to be ready for the season. So, and then you always want to try and do that as safely as you can, and so you always worry about the nicks and the injuries that are inevitably going to pop up along the way. So you try and navigate that as best you can.
Gerrit.
In terms of the competition regarding the bullpen, I'm guessing you won't give a number, but
right. How
how would you characterize the number of true open spots for that bullpen?
There are some, and look, obviously, we all right now you all kind of gear towards opening day and what that's going to look like. Competition, injuries, all things kind of come to the surface and can change the template a little bit. But I think one of the things I'm really excited about this year is, some of the depth and to some degree competition that we have within our starting rotation that could end up if we're largely healthy, and obviously you're getting Carlos back and you're getting Gerrit back at some point, and if we're healthy and guys are performing, you could bump some guys into that bullpen mix, and you could end up with guys that not only could give you length, but guys that could turn into a leverage situation down there. So I'm looking forward to seeing how all that shakes out, not only in spring training, but in the first couple months of the season as well.
Greg.
With Carlos and Gerrit, how far into their throwing programs are they, and how have they kind of responded to the offseason and everything coming back from their surgeries? Yeah,
good. They're pretty far into it, especially Carlos. He's probably not far behind, from the start of the season. And then as far as Gerrit, I think he's thrown a number of pens already in California. I think he's scheduled to begin lives in a couple of weeks, and then, could potentially, even get into some game action by the end of spring. We'll see how all that shakes out and if we want to do that or not. But both have done well.
Pete, to the right.
Aaron, what are your first impressions of Ryan Weatherspoon, just talking to him, and what about your expectations for him in this rotation?
Yeah, really excited that we were able to get him. I think he's got a chance to be really good. I mean, for him, it's about being able to go to the post. He struggled with different things that have kept him off the field. I think he's done a really nice job of kind of evolving his off-season training program that hopefully will help him be in a better spot. We feel like he is at this point. But to watch him move, really good athlete, moves really well on the mound, obviously really big stuff. And hopefully there's some tweaks in his game as still a young man that will help him kind of take that next step. But I think the biggest step for him is being healthy and being available. And if that's the case, I think we have a chance to have a really good pitcher on our hands.
Brendan, to the left.
Aaron, two questions. First, I'm on your right. Hi. Two questions. First, today's pitchers and catchers, it kind of came out of nowhere last year, but where are things at with Giancarlo? Do you expect him to be full, ready to go?
Yeah, he should be good.
Okay. Also, you guys added a lot of players at the deadline last year.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about you guys running it back with the
Yeah.
same roster. How important and how helpful is it that you guys had a full offseason with these guys who came in last year and kind of thrown into the fire of a playoff race to adjust? And
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always important. And then again, kind of the culture that's been created down here in Tampa in the winter, especially over the last few years, the amount of guys that are, over at Himes for days, weeks, in some cases months, being able to go there and get everything they need from a coaching standpoint, from a, nutritional standpoint, strength and conditioning, all those things, to have eyes on those guys, to have those guys that you talked about, that came in at the deadline that really helped finish off our roster. And last year, those trades in a lot of ways were made not only for the run last year to kind of complete our roster, but in a lot of cases with a long-term thought in mind, too, that they were going to impact this season. So excited to have those guys really in the fold with us in the mix now. And, to varying degrees, I think a ton of those guys are going to hopefully impact us in a big way this year.
We'll go down the front row.
Aaron, can I follow up on Stanton? The idea, do you think he's a full player? Like, is that something you have to manage with him? They said it wasn't going to heal completely.
I think
what's the outlook there.
I think G's doing great. I haven't seen him yet. He's one of the guys that will get here. But he's had a good winter. He's ready to roll. I don't expect any limitations. I usually slow play him into games in spring, so you might not see him that first week. But that being said, I haven't had those conversations with him yet. When you say full player, you mean in the field?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, so he's got no limitations right now. We'll talk about how much outfield we mix in. Probably the biggest thing is keeping it available so that when things do come up, we're in a position to pop them out there if we have to. But those will be conversations that I have with him as I get with him and the days unfold and see how we're doing.
Dear.
With Paul, we were just talking to him about coming back. What kind of role do you see him in now, and how might that affect some other guys on the team?
Goldschmidt?
Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, I'm thrilled to get him back. Just one of the best people I've ever had the chance to manage, and he was so good in our room, such a good performer on the field. Obviously, what he was against left-handed pitching last year, and coupled with the moves we made at the deadline last year to have more of a presence against left-handed pitching with all our left-handed hitters. He balances out our roster so much. So as far as playing, we'll see. I think he's prepared for anything. Obviously, Ben Rice is going to get, has earned that, even next step, even after having 550 plate appearances last year for Benny. I'm hoping that even goes up this year. But I see Goldie playing a big role, even if we are all healthy, but more of a role player if we're all healthy. But as things can change on a dime at any point, and it changes the role a little bit.
Maybe it would only be marginal, but could you see Ben catching a little bit more with Paul back in the fold?
Yeah, I think that's possible, and it's something I've talked with Benny about. So how much that is still, again, remains to be seen, and again, how does our roster shake out? How do the inevitable injuries or things that come up can affect that? But we have him preparing, to be a real option for us behind the plate.
Chris.
Just to be clear about the injuries, outside of Clark, Gerrit, and Carlos, no one else is injured or starting slowly?
No, we should be good.
And then secondly, I don't know if you saw yesterday, but IKF told Red Sox reporters that the Blue Jays were hoping to see you guys in the playoffs last year because they thought you were an easier matchup. How do you feel about that?
I guess he was right. A little surprising to hear IKF say that, but whatever, that's fine. I mean,
Does it bother you at all?
not really, honestly. I mean, you got to play who you play and whatever.
Randy and John.
It was a little surprising that you guys didn't spend money on relievers after losing some of the guys. You brought a couple guys back, but how much is that you guys think you can get more out of Bird, Duvall, and then you mentioned some of the starters, maybe a Warren could eventually transition, a Weathers. That was not a strength last year like it was the year before. Do you think the bullpen, as is, can be a bigger strength this year?
Yeah, I think it has a chance to be. And again, I think it's because of our overall pitching depth that I really like. And so that may mean a reliever or a starter having to collapse. It may be somebody that, nobody's writing about at this point that usually, especially in bullpens, seems to always emerge around the league. The bullpen is usually one of the most volatile things that's hard to predict sometimes. I think we feel good about the talent that we have and who's going to kind of emerge from that group to grab a meaningful role, coupled with the handful of guys that are back, that are in leverage spots that we feel really good about. And you mentioned Camilo. He's had a really good winter, kind of getting ready for the WBC, and we've had really good communication with him throughout the winter. And one of those players that came over at the deadline that I think being here with us now and you're building that relationship hopefully is something that serves him and us both well. But I think it's always a little bit of an unknown with the bullpen, but I feel like it has a chance to be a real strength for us. We got to see how the dust settles, though, a little bit. And, I think, there's some big numbers attached to relievers, this winter. So I think, we obviously had to address different things. So, you try and allocate your resources the best you can.
With Duvall and Bird, do you think I know Bird was only a very short sample size, but do you think of his struggles adjusting or just a bad spurt? What do you see from their arms that make you believe that they can be high leverage guys that could replace some of the guys you lost lately?
Well, that's who Camilo's been. He has been that high leverage guy, and really at the end of the year with us, I felt like was throwing the ball really well for us, getting big outs for us. So, and then, I think his best season that he's had to date was 23, back when he, pitched in the WBC also. So we're hoping that kind of, making sure that winter is focused in the right way to make sure you're prepared, and hopefully is something that, serves him well, and another year kind of like that in store. He certainly has the capability. As far as Bird, we love the stuff. Really good competitor. Obviously had some struggles here. Really on the heels of struggling a little bit before we traded for him, and we think a little bit of that was probably a little overworked. Probably had a little wear and tear on him in the middle of the season. That took its toll. He was used a lot in that first half in Colorado. So hopefully now a couple months with us, in the minor leagues, and then an off season. I saw his bullpen the other day. He looked really good. But I think he has a chance to play a real meaningful role for us.
John, right behind you, Randy.
You were very positive last spring about Cam Schlitler. You seemed like you thought he had a lot of potential. Now that you've seen it for 15, 16 starts, how high do you think?
I still think he has a lot of potential.
How good can he be?
Yeah. It's just when you throw strikes like he does, and you start with his best pitch is his fastball, and when you kind of throwing with his size and his angle and that big time fastball that you can fill up the zone with, that's a good place for a pitcher to start. And then last year we saw his kind of secondary arsenal kind of evolve from the minor leagues even through with us. getting more away from the sweeper, more of that cutter that became a really good pitch for him. But the two-seam fastball, too, became a real important weapon for him down the stretch with us. So having the 4 and the two-seam as kind of his bread and butter, like starting with that, and then just a really good competitor. And that's the thing I noticed, when I really met him kind of for the first time, really, was when he came over and pitched in that game late in spring. There was just something to the way he went about it and his competitiveness, and then obviously put together a great season.
Eric and Brian.
Pretty much all of your competitors in the AL East made moves of significance that on paper improve them going into the season. How do you evaluate the division this year?
Tough. I feel like I sit up here every year and talk about the AL East, and for good reason. But there's no question that it's going to be tough. I feel like the Red Sox, we started to see them kind of come of age last year, and the pieces they've had some attrition too, but feel like they have a chance to be an outstanding club. Obviously, the Blue Jays are the reigning AL champs, and they've made strides to improve. And then Baltimore's the team that really in the second half of the season was more in line with who they were in 23 and 24, and obviously they've had some people come in. So I think they're going to be a team to reckon with, and the Rays are always tough. So the division's real. We think we're one of those teams that can go out and win it. But again, it's February, and all of us and them all have a long way to go in building what is ultimately a winning and a team capable of winning this division.
Brian.
This will be year 2 for Austin Wells as your starting catcher. What did you evaluate him as last year, and how do you think he can continue to grow?
Yeah. I think he's really established himself as a really good defensive catcher in this league, which is, I think the thing that kind of caught us all a little off maybe a couple of years ago when he emerged. It's like, the defense is way better than we thought, and we thought the offense was going to be the carrying thing. And while he's done some good things offensively, 20 homers again last year for your catcher, and I think when you take his defensive ability and what he's done offensively, like, you sign up for that for your catcher. That being said, I expect more out of Austin Wells. I think there's a lot more in the tank. There should be more in the tank. He knows that. So hopefully, him and some others, we can find more consistency offensively, because we do still really think that he could be a frontline offensive catcher as well. But we got to keep getting there.
What do you think has held him back from that?
I don't know. It's just, because he's had, really good stretches where you see all the things that really tough out, the power. Last year I thought he did a really good job left on left of really having some quality at bats. So being more consistent in that regard, and hopefully another year of experience. Being a catcher in this league's a lot, not just the physical part, but just and especially being coming up as a rookie and taking over as the starting catcher for the New York Yankees and this staff and all the responsibilities that come with being a major league catcher. That can be a challenge to balance it all. And we expect you to do a lot offensively too. So hopefully with more experience, that consistency will be the thing that follows, and he can jump to the front of the line or the top of the list of some of the other offensive catchers.
Take a couple more. John, and then also to the right.
Well, the whole division is very strong. The Blue Jays did win most of the games against your team last year, and you've said that they were your kryptonite. They've added a $30 million a year pitcher. Are they the team to beat?
I guess. I mean, they're the AL champs, so I don't. However you want to frame it, I mean, you gotta pay them their respect. And I think one of the stretches, they beat us up in Toronto in like a stretch where we played them, I think, 2 series, like 7 games up there in the course of a few weeks when we were a little bit broken. We weren't at our best at all. So I think that played a role. But they're the champs, and so, everyone will be kind of gunning for them. But at the same time, I don't think that's for you guys to write, and we're trying to get ready to be the best team we can be. And we think if we reach our potential, that has a chance to be really special.
Randy.
One more on Stanton. He's missed a lot of time, 6 of the last 7 seasons. But if he is healthy and you can get a full season out of him, last year his batting average was a lot better. You talk about how he's learning to manage his body more. What would that mean to you guys if you get a full season out of this guy? Because when he's on a good streak, still he's about as good as anyone.
Yeah, I'm excited. Going back to 24, he was largely healthy for us. Missed the month of August, roughly, that 30-day stretch where he got hurt, and then obviously came back in September and then had an awesome postseason. And then last year, was mostly, once he came back and debuted for us, was mostly healthy and incredibly productive. I think just a testament to him just continuing to know himself really well, having that ability to make adjustments to the league, to what teams are doing to him. He's a very thoughtful, analytic player that, I think I'm not going to be surprised if he goes out and has a really magical year for us. I think that's still in there. Obviously, the big thing with G is keep him healthy, and I want to go in and in a perfect world, like, we don't have any interruption with an injury or anything, and but I protect him by just that you get into that role where you're playing 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5. I think is a good thing for him, and hopefully that's something that will allow him to stay healthy throughout the year.
Last 2, Nikki, to the right.
Do you think that there's an extra energy or excitement in the spring when it's a World Baseball Classic year?
We have so many guys involved in it, so there's that, and especially the captain going. So that's, and I know he's very excited about it. And I have two of my coaches going to be a part of it. So we have a number of guys going. So it definitely makes for a more unique spring training. Tough to say on the buzz. I think the WBC going into this year is probably at an all-time high in its popularity. I feel like that popularity's kind of been growing every few years. And I feel like it's reached the level for the U.S. team now. Not that, they've won it in the past and they've had great players, but now it seems like everyone wants to kind of play. And kind of like we've seen with the Dominican, Japan, Puerto Rico, some of these teams that it feels like that level now for the U.S. And, I know personally I'll be probably tuning it in quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to it. And obviously I have a different level of interest because we do have so many players involved and a couple coaches that are involved heavily. So I think it's a great thing for our sport, and I'm expecting a very entertaining and exciting WBC that hopefully is filled with good health.
Meredith, last one.
Aaron, as you noted, still a couple days away from position players reporting, but I know Anthony Volpe has been down here in Tampa for quite some time. What is he doing right now? Where is he at in the rehab process?
Yeah, so he is doing well. Strength is all there, like in the weight room and stuff like that. He's got all that back. That's the thing that took a little while. His range of motion is tremendous. And I think he's about at the point where he's doing all his ground ball work and full on in the weight room. and I think he starts his hitting progression sometime in the next week or two. But that's he has not hit yet, and that'll be the last thing he has to do, obviously, to start ramping up.